All right, here we go. Chapter 3 of Understanding Media. And are we understanding it? I'm not so sure. But even if we're not understanding it, this is a very fun book to read. Lots of big words. So last chapter was media, hot and cold. And essentially there's hot media, and hot means high definition, low participation. Meaning that there's a lot of content and there's no room for the audience to participate in it because it's already there. Whereas cold or cool mediums are low definition but high in participation. Meaning there's not a lot of content and it forces the audience or the viewer to participate and do the work and fill in the gaps. So for example, they said that like a movie is a very hot medium, and also radio is a hot medium, but then telephone calls would be a cold medium. So now we're going to look at what happens when you reverse the overheated medium in Chapter 3, Reversal of the Overheated Medium. A headline for June 21st, 1963 read, Washington-Moscow hotline to open in 60 days. The Times of London service, Geneva. The agreement to establish a direct communication link between Washington and Moscow for emergencies was signed here yesterday by Charles Stell of the United States and Semyon Sarapkin of the Soviet Union. The link, known as the Hotline, will be opened within 60 days, according to U.S. officials. It will make use of leased commercial circuits, one cable, and other wireless using teleprinter equipment. The decision to use the hot printed medium, okay, and print is also apparently very hot there, see? The decision to use hot printed medium in place of the cool participational telephone medium is unfortunate in the extreme. No doubt the decision was prompted by the literary bias of the West for the printed form, on the ground that it is more impersonal than the telephone. The printed form has quite different implications in Moscow from what it has in Washington. So with the telephone, the Russians' love of this instrument, so congenial to their oral traditions, is owing to the rich non-visual involvement it affords. The rich non-visual involvement it affords. The Russian uses the telephone for the sort of effects we associate with the eager conversation of the lapel gripper whose face is 12 inches away. Well, you know, because he's a close talker. Both telephone and teleprinter, as amplifications of the unconscious cultural bias of Moscow on one hand, and of Washington on the other, are invitations to monstrous invitation to monstrous misunderstandings. The Russian bugs. The Russian. Oops. The Russian bugs rooms and spies by ear, finding this quite natural. He is outraged by our visual spying, however, finding this quite unnatural. The principle that during the stages of their development all things appear under forms opposite to those that they finally present is an ancient doctrine. Interest in the power of things to reverse themselves by evolution is evident in a great diversity of observations, sage and jocular. Alexander Pope wrote, Vice is a monster of such frightful mien? Mien? Vice is such a monster of such frightful mien. Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness. What even is that? Oh, it's, what is it? A person's look or manner, especially one of a particular kind, indicating Their character or mood? How do you say it? Mean. 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 Vice is such a monster of frightful mean, a person's look or manner. As to be hated needs but to be seen, but seen too oft familiar with its face. We first endure, then pity, then embrace. A caterpillar. Is that me or is it just terrible? A caterpillar, gazing at the butterfly, is supposed to have remarked, "Wow, you'll never catch me in one of those darn things." You'll never catch me in one of those darn things. As in butterfly wings. At another level, we have seen in this century the changeover from the debunking of traditional myths and legends to their reverent study. As we begin to react in depth to the social life and problems of our global village, we become reactionaries. Involvement that goes with our instant technologies transforms the most socially conscious people into conservatives. When Sputnik had first gone into orbit, a schoolteacher asked her second graders to write some verse on the subject. One child wrote, "The stars are so big. The earth is so small. Stay as you are." Wow. Deep. With man, his knowledge and the process of obtaining knowledge are of equal magnitude. Our ability to apprehend galaxies and subatomic structures as well is a movement of faculties that includes and transcends them. The second grader who wrote the words above lives in a world much vaster than any which a scientist today has instruments to measure, or concepts to describe. As W.B. Yeats wrote of this reversal, the visible world is no longer a reality, and the unseen world is no longer a dream. Dun dun dun. Associated with this transformation of the real world into science fiction is the reversal now proceeding apace, by which the Western world is going Eastern, even as the East goes Western. Joyce encoded this reciprocal reverse in his cryptic phrase, "The West shall shake the East awake, while ye have the night for morn." The title of his Finnegan's Wake is a set of multi-leveled puns on the reversal by which Western man enters his tribal, or Finn, cycle once more. We haven't read Finnegan's Wake. Maybe we add that to the list. Yeah, let's add that to the list. It is like our contemporary consciousness of the unconscious. Our contemporary consciousness of the unconscious. The stepping up of speed from the mechanical to the instant electric form reverses explosion into implosion. Don't try to understand it. Just feel it. In our present electric age, the imploding or contracting energies of our world now clash with the old expansionist and traditional patterns of organization. Until recently, our institutions and arrangements, social, political, and economic, had shared a one-way pattern. We still think of it as explosive or expansive, and though it no longer obtains, we still talk about the population explosion and the explosion in learning. In fact, it is not the increase of numbers in the world that creates our concern with population. Rather, it is the fact that everybody in the world has to live in the utmost proximity created by our electric involvement in one another's lives. Ho 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 ho! Yeah. In education, likewise, it is not the increase in numbers of those seeking to learn that creates the crisis. Our new concern with education follows upon the changeover to an interrelation in knowledge, where before the separate subjects of the curriculum had stood apart from each other. Departmental sovereignties have melted away as rapidly as national sovereignties under conditions of electric speed. Obsession with the older patterns of mechanical, one-way expansion from centers to margins is no longer relevant to our electric world. Electricity does not centralize, but decentralizes. It is like the difference between a railway system and an electric grid system. The one requires railheads and big urban centers. Electric power, equally available in the farmhouse and the executive suite, permits any place to be a center, and does not require large aggregations. This reverse pattern appeared quite early in electrical labor-saving devices, whether a toaster or washing machine or vacuum cleaner. Instead of saving work, these devices permit everybody to do his own work. What the 19th century had delegated to servants and housemaids, we now do for politics. It permits Castro to exist as independent nucleus or center. Okay, I was following along when you were listing off the household appliances there, and then you lost me at Castro. I'm sorry. Principle. Oh, I totally missed a line too. What the 19th century had delegated to servants and housemaids, we now do for ourselves. This principle applies in toto in the electric age. In toto? In toto. That's gotta be Latin. In toto. No, it's not Latin. It's just... What is it? In toto, is that slang? In toto, such as a whole. Such proposals should be subjected to specific criticism rather than rejected in toto. As a whole, in all, overall, in toto. Okay. This principle applies in toto to the whole in the electric age. In politics, it permits Castro to exist as independent nucleus or center. It would permit Quebec to leave the Canadian Union in a way quite inconceivable under the regime of the railways. That's closer to happening than ever, right? It would permit Quebec to leave the Canadian Union in a way quite inconceivable under the regime of the railways. The railways require a uniform political and economic space. Tell me something I don't know. On the other hand, airplane and radio permit the utmost discontinuity and diversity in spatial organization. Because they can go anywhere, anytime, sort of thing? I think so. Today, the great principle of classical physics and economics and political science, namely that of the divisibility of each process, has reversed itself by sheer extension into the unified field theory. The unified field theory. And automation in industry replaces the divisibility of process with the organic interlacing of all functions in the complex. The electric tape succeeds the assembly line. The electric tape succeeds the assembly line. Automation in industry replaces the divisibility of process with the organic interlacing of all functions in the complex. The electric tape succeeds the assembly line. In the new electric age of information and programmed production, commodities themselves assume more and more the character of information. Although this trend appears mainly in the increasing advertising budget, significantly it is those commodities that are most used in social communication, cigarettes, cosmetics, and soap, cosmetic removers, that beat much of the burden of the upkeep of the media in general. Yeah, yeah. They well, maybe not cigarettes anymore, but cosmetics, yeah, and soap and cosmetic removers, yeah. There's just nothing but ads for those things. It was Julian Benda's great betrayal that helped to clarify the new situation in which the intellectual suddenly holds the whip hand in society. Benda saw that the artists and intellectuals who had long been alienated from power, and who since Voltaire had been in opposition, had now been drafted for service in the highest echelons of decision-making. Their great betrayal was that they had surrendered their autonomy and had become the flunkies of power, as the atomic physicist at the present moment is the flunky of the warlords. Ooh, does that have to do with, is that that's like because of the Cold War, right? And all the stuff that went on then, because this came out in the 60s, right? Right? Am I right or am I right? The atomic physicist at the present moment is the flunky of the warlords. Who are the warlords? Oh, I think we know. Had Benda known his history, he would have been less angry and less surprised. For it has always been the role of intelligentsia. It has always been the role of intelligentsia to act as liaison and as mediators between old and new power groups. Most familiar of such groups is the case of the Greek slaves, who were for long the educators and confidential clerks of the Roman power. And it is precisely this servile role of the confidential clerk to the tycoon, commercial, military, or political, that the educator has continued to play in the Western world until the present moment. In England, the Angries were a group of such clerks who had suddenly emerged from the lower echelons by the educational escape hatch. As they emerged into the upper world of power, they found that the air was not at all fresh or bracing. But they lost their nerve even quicker than Bernard Shaw lost his. Like Shaw, they quickly settled down to whimsy and to the cultivation of entertainment values. In his study of history, Toynbee notes a great many reversals. A great many reversals. A great many things. A great many reversals of form and dynamic. As when in the middle of the 4th century AD, the Germans in the Roman service began abruptly to be proud of their tribal names and to retain them. Such a moment marked a new confidence born of saturation with Roman values. And it was a moment marked by the complementary Roman swing toward primitive values. As Americans saturate with European values, especially since TV, they begin to insist upon American coach lamps, hitching posts, and colonial kitchenware as cultural objects. Just as the barbarians got to the top of the Roman social ladder, the Romans themselves were disposed to assume the dress and manners of tribesmen out of the same frivolous and snobbish spirit that attached the French court of Louis XVI, to the world of shepherds and shepherdesses. It would have seemed a natural moment for the intellectuals to have taken over while the governing class was touring Disneyland, as it were. So it must have appeared to Marx and his followers. But they reckoned without understanding the dynamics of the new media of communication. Marx based his analysis most untimely on the machine, just as the telegraph and other implosive forms began to reverse the mechanical dynamic. The present chapter is concerned with showing that in any medium or structure, there is what Kenneth Boulding calls a break boundary at which the system suddenly changes into another or passes some point of no return in its dynamic processes. Several such break boundaries will be discussed later, oh goody, including the one from stasis to motion, and from the mechanical to the organic, in the pictorial world. One effect of the static photo had been to suppress the conspicuous consumption of the rich, but the effect of the speed-up of the photo had been to provide fantasy riches for the poor of the entire globe. Today, the road beyond its break boundary turns cities into highways, and the highway proper takes on a continuous urban character. Another characteristic reversal after passing a road break boundary is that the country ceases to be the center of all work, and the city ceases to be the center of leisure. In fact, Improved roads and transport have reversed the ancient pattern and made cities the centers of work and the country the place of leisure and of recreation. Very true. Earlier, the increase of traffic that came with money and roads had ended the static tribal state, as Toynbee calls the nomadic food-gathering culture. Typical of the reversing that occurs at break boundaries is the paradox that nomadic mobile man, the hunter and food gatherer, is socially static. Socially static. On the other hand, sedentary specialist man is dynamic, explosive, progressive. The new magnetic or world city will be static and iconic or inclusive. The new magnetic or world city will be static and iconic or inclusive. In the ancient world, the intuitive awareness of break boundaries as points of reversal and of no return was embodied in the Greek idea of hubris, which Toynbee presents in his study of history under the head of the nemesis of creativity and the reversal of roles. The Greek dramatists presented the idea of creativity as creating, also its own kind of blindness, as in the case of Ipidus Rex, who solves the riddle of the Sphinx. It was as if the Greeks felt that the penalty for one breakthrough was a general sealing off of awareness to the total field. In a Chinese work, The Way and Its Power, a Whaley translation, there is a series of instances of the overheated medium, the overextended man or culture, and the peripety or reversal that inevitably follows. Peripety, I'm sorry, that's a first for me. Never seen that one before. Peripety. Peripety. See, I couldn't even go to the... where is it? What is peripety? Peripety? Peripety. Peripety. Definitions of peripety. A sudden and unexpected change of fortune or reverse of circumstances, especially in a literary work. Okay, peripety. Peripety. That's a new one. And the peripety, a sudden and unexpected change of fortune or reverse of circumstances, or reversal that inevitably follows. He who stands on tiptoe does not stand firm. He who takes the longest strides does not walk the fastest. He who boasts of what he will do succeeds in nothing. He who is proud of his work achieves nothing that endures. One of the most common causes of breaks in any system is the cross-fertilization with another system, such as happened to the print with the steam press or with radio and movies. That yielded the talkies. Because they used to be called silent films, and then when they started having audio, people started calling them talkies. Today, with microfilm and microcards, not to mention electric memories, that's a band name right there. The printed word assumes again much of the handicraft character of a manuscript. But printing from movable type was itself the major break boundary in the history of phonetic literacy, just as the phonetic alphabet had been the break boundary between tribal and individualist man. The endless reversals, or break boundaries, passed in the interplay of the structures of bureaucracy and enterprise include the point at which individuals began to be held responsible and accountable for their private actions. That was the moment of the collapse of tribal collective authority. Centuries later, when further explosion and expansion had exhausted the powers of private action, corporate enterprise invented the idea of public debt, making the individual privately accountable for group action. That sounds like why my car insurance premiums went up. Wasn't because of me, it was because of other people. Ah. As the 19th century heated up, the mechanical and dissociative procedures of technical fragmentation, the entire attention of men. As the 19th century heated up, the mechanical and dissociative procedures of technical fragmentation, the entire attention of men turned to the associative and the corporate. In the first great age of the substitution of machine for human toil, Carlyle and the pre-Raphaelites promulgated, ah, God, what? Promulgated, come on now. What is it? What, promulgated? Promulgated? Promulgate? Promulgated. Promulgate?
Promulgate.
Oh, the L is silent?
Promulgate.
Promulgate? Put a law or decree into effect by official proclamation? Put a law or decree into effect. Promulgate. Promulgate.
Promulgate.
Promulgate. In the first great age of the substitution of machine for human toil, Carlyle and the pre-Raphaelites promulgated the doctrine of work as a mystical social communion, and millionaires like Ruskin and Morris toiled like navvies for aesthetic reasons. What's a navvy? What's a navvy? Oh my God, these are all real words. A laborer employed in the excavation and construction of road, railroad, or canal. Navvies. Millionaires like Ruskin and Morris toiled like navvies for aesthetic reasons. Marx was an impressionable recipient of these doctrines. Most bizarre of all the reversals in the great Victorian age of mechanization and high moral tone is the counter-strategy of Lewis Carroll and Edward Lear, whose nonsense has proved exceedingly durable. While the Lord Cardigans were taking their bloodbaths in the Valley of Death, Gilbert and Sullivan were announcing that the boundary break had been passed. Okay, there's like way too many name drops there, and before we finish, we're going to just look up like who? Who do we start with? Carlyle? Like Carlyle who? Carlyle who? Tell me. Carlyle who? Just say Carlyle. And I guess I'm just not smart enough to know who these people are. Carlyle. Not even how you spell Carlyle. Pre-Raphaelite. Thomas Carlyle. Is it this guy? Thomas Carlyle is an unfinished portrait of the Scottish essayist, historian, and philosopher of the same name, painted by English pre-Raphaelite painter John Everett Millais. In the first great age of the subject of human toil, Carlyle and the pre-Raph promulgated the doctrine of work as mystical social communion. Millionaires like Ruskin and Morris. Who is that? Ruskin and Morris. Who are they? Oh, this is the whole thing. Okay, so it's an arts and crafts movement. The arts and crafts movement was an international trend in the decorative and fine arts that developed earliest and most fully in the British Isles. Okay. Where do those guys come into it? It was inspired by the ideas of historian Thomas Carlyle, art critic John Ruskin, and designer William Morris. Okay, it's a movement. They toiled like navvies for aesthetic reasons. Oh, because of the art, so they're just like how things looked. Marx was an impressionable recipient of these doctrines. Most bizarre of all the reversals in the great Victorian age with mechanization, high moral tone, Cal strategy, Lewis Carroll. And Marx, of course, I am assuming they're talking about Karl Marx. This guy. German philosophizer. And then Lewis Carroll, Edward Lear. Lewis Carroll. I feel like he wrote something. He probably wrote something. Yeah, Lewis Carroll, English author and poet. Okay. Edward Lear, probably this similar. Artist and illustrator. Okay. Whose nonsense has proved exceedingly durable. Whose nonsense? Because he was an artist and illustrator? While the Lord Cardigans, okay, let's Cardigans. Lord Cardigans. Lord Cardigans. Earl of Cardigan. Ha! Is the title in the peerage of England that was created by Charles. Whatever. While the Lord Cardigans were taking their blood baths in the Valley of Death. That's no. These guys were taking blood baths? Lord Cardigan's blood baths? That can't be a thing. Oh, as in like a battle. There are bloodbaths in the Valley of Death. Gilbert and Sullivan. Gilbert and Sullivan were announcing that the boundary break had been passed. Gilbert and Sullivan. Gilbert and Sullivan were a Victorian-era theatrical partnership of the dramatist W.S. Gilbert and composer Arthur Sullivan. The two men collaborated on 14 comic operas between 1871 and 1896, of which HMS Pinafore. The Pirates of Penzance and the Mikado are among the best known. Okay, so all these guys were taking their... so the boundary... because they... Sure. Alright, so that's who those folks are. Well, there you have it, folks. That was chapter 3. Sorry, we went off on a bit of a tangerine there, but there were just so many names there. And we should really be going and looking up all the other names, but we'd be here all night. So, yeah. Thanks for joining us. Get ready for chapter 4, The Gadget Lover. You can kind of get an idea of what that's going to be about. We'll catch you next time.